Hi, Bridget. I'm Cherise. Thank you for a wonderful post this week. Thought you did a very good job with explaining the differences between ANOVA and ANCOVA, and particularly your focus of kind of a research question really stood out to me. You spent some time talking about, for example, studying children and trauma, and then needing to partial out covariates such as substance use within the home or various elements that have impacted those children. And it led me to researching a study. I've had past experience with children, and the ACE, adverse childhood experiences, continues, of course, to be a focus of trauma work, even as adults, and then just kind of thinking about that aspect. And so this study talked about children with multi-trauma histories and treatment selection, which was also a focus of what you talked about. It basically took about 97 individual children and kind of examined the relationship between their trauma exposure and the type of treatment model, and then pulled out a huge number of covariates. And it's so funny because I should know that there's not just going to be one covariate. I think that's how we were introduced to the process to understand. But this actual research gave me more insight to the fact that typically in research, researchers are basically going to pull out multiple covariates. And so they pulled out the child's gender, placement status, so the difference between if they were in the home with a single parent, both parents, a foster parent, or some type of other caregiver like a grandparent, their age, and then as well the type of treatment that they received and their end of treatment scores. And so some interesting conclusions were found in this study that basically pointed out the fact that the type of trauma experience plays a big part in how well a child responded to the treatment that they were given, but also recognizing that the later or the older that they were in terms of age, and students in this study were between 2 and 12, but basically the older that they were, the more challenging it was for treatment models to be effective, and their behavior or their way of showing the impact of their trauma was more externalized. So we saw in this study more behavior issues. And I just, again, feel those are things that in the back of our mind, whether we're educators or working with children or families, we can absolutely recognize and see that. But it's also not always something that we think about in the moment, is how can we also help the general population even to think about, okay, here's how this child is presenting. What are all of the factors that might be at play for what we're seeing? And then another noted piece in this study was underreporting is, if a child has had a number of different traumas, then they're also less likely to report them as traumas because it becomes such a part of their normal. And I believe there's a lot of people walking around with a very similar story of not understanding the impact of some of the things that happen to them. And it just goes to show the value of the ANCOVA. It helps increase experimental control, but at the same time, the results absolutely depend on which covariates are included in the analysis. So thank you for a wonderful post that just kind of pushed me into doing some further research and